Hey, welcome to another edition of Mississippi Stories. I'm your host, Marshall Ramsey, editor-at-large at Mississippi Today. And our guest today, and I'm going to read off a little bit of a bio here. It's just somebody I've had an honor and a pleasure to work with for a long time. I think we worked together for about 22, 23 years, something like that. Deeply respect him. Great guy. Jerry Mitchell. He founded the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting in 2018 after a long and productive career at the Clarion Ledger. I think you started in 86. I started in 94. Yep. So I was a newcomer compared to you. He's been profiled by everybody. In fact, I remember when Nightline came into the newsroom, and I always joked, there's always was cameras over by where you sat. Somebody was profiling you. I was like, oh, who is it today? Oh, there's was it Chris Wallace that came? Yeah, I think it was Chris Wallace that came to interview me one time, wasn't it? And I just remember y'all doing B-roll through the sports department, so it was kind of funny.
Yeah, the sports. Yeah, when they started taking over the sports people, that was it was
kind of surreal. Anyway, you're a Macarthur Grant Foundation Genius Grant Award winner, which is the long version of that. What was that 2009? No.
Yeah, 2009.
Yeah. God, it seemed like yesterday.
Yeah, it didn't seem long ago.
I know it. You've won numerous awards. You and I were Pulitzer finalists the same year. I said you should have won that year.
2005. No, I figured I'd lose. CIA secret prisons. I wasn't going to beat that, but that's fine.
Well, but still, you should have won. Okay, just work with me here. You're supposed to say no.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. My ego is this big. No, seriously. But anyway, I mean, I know.
I you definitely should have won by now. I mean,
well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, there's like 6 of us left.
Finalists twice, and so yeah, you're.
Yeah, well,
no question. The best.
Well, they didn't even award a Pulitzer this year for editing.
I saw it. I'm like, what are they saying with that? That was kind of a very odd decision on the Pulitzer board. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know what they were thinking, but I think that was I can't imagine that's not wrong. Now, maybe I'm wrong in thinking that, but it struck me wrong.
They did it in 73 also, but I think what was really so bad about this year is there really was a
pandemic. I mean, I didn't great cartoons.
Yeah. I didn't enter this year, but so I'm not saying it because I'm personally
I know
about it, but there was a lot of really, really good cartoons. And, obviously the pandemic and with Trump, there was a lot of issues and there were visual commentary mattered. But if you think of it, I think 75 people entered and, over 200 entered and it was $75 a piece. So it was like $15,000 they made off the category. You're just like, ugh. But anyway, I know. I mean, we can talk about
that's
where
fine.
the business is going,
but
yeah, no, it's just like, ugh. Anyway, but you're also an author, and that's where you are today. You've been out speaking and talking about your book. The book is fantastic. It's A Race Against Time, and just basically has done really well. And I enjoyed it. You talk about 4 really big cases that you broke over the time you were at the Clarion Ledger, and we'll dive into a lot of that. The book came out last year, right as the pandemic started.
Yeah, I got about
great luck there, Jerry.
4. Yeah, I know. I think I got about 4 or 5 weeks in. I literally landed in Seattle just as the pandemic was hitting.
You were kidding me. Oh my gosh. Right at the epicenter of where it was at,
Yeah, what I never forget is, this is like when everything's just beginning.
Yeah.
They had a statue of a dog and someone had put like a mask on the dog.
And I mean, Washington was really where it began.
No, that's where it kind of first came into the country. First huge outbreak,
Yeah. So, but I mean,
it chased me from there to LA back to Mississippi. So anyway,
it did. Well, thanks, Jerry. Appreciate that. Thanks for being a superstar.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
Appreciate that. You never did get it though, right?
No, I haven't. I've been very fortunate, very blessed.
Yeah, same here. I was very glad to get the vaccine. It was a
yeah, me too.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting at that tender age now.
We don't need any more diseases.
Exactly. No, thank you. No, thank you. But that said, even though suddenly your book tour got shut down, the reviews that started coming in.
Oh man, that's been great.
When the last sentence on the New York Times says it warrants praise, gratitude, and a wide audience.
Yeah, I know. They stuck that on the book cover, on the cover of the paperback. So
Yeah. So it is out in paperback now, and yeah, that was kind of a nice little blurb. It's like, thank you, New York Times. But you had a lot of other great reviews. How did that make you feel? Because I mean, you and I've been talking about this book for a long time. It seemed
I know, I've been working on it forever.
Right.
Yeah, people ask me how long did it take you to write this. And I said, well, if you include all the time I've written on it and reported on, it's 30 years, which sounds embarrassing that it took that long. But didn't really get a book deal till later, and so it all worked out. And to be honest, I'm grateful. I mean, I think the advantage of time, in a sense, was it gave me a little more distance from it. You know what I mean? And I think I was able to judge it in a better way than if I had written it just in kind of white hot, heat of the moment or whatever.
Well, I mean, there's an awful lot packed into.
It is.
I mean, it technically could have been a book this thick.
It was in the first draft.
Oh, really?
It was literally twice as long. I know people don't believe me. They're like, you see it and you're not thinking this is like, because it's I wrote it like a page turner, and you don't think of that being twice as long, but it was. And I had a great editor, John Cox. So anyway,
I was going to ask you who edited it. So I mean,
Jonathan Cox at Simon Schuster, and he's like my son's age, which is kind of embarrassing, imagine someone like my son editing my book, but he was fantastic. He was just great and helped me. I've never written a book, and helped me shape it. And, I had, I know how to write, but it's just a matter of not, I've never written anything book long, that kind of thing. So anyway.
Well, you have written several series though that were almost book long once you.
Yeah, there were some that were short, kind of maybe venturing into the length of like a novella or something like that, but nothing book length.
I mean, I remember Preacher and the Klansman, which was one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't know what my car keys are, but I remembered that. So
exactly.
Tell us a little. I mean, the book deal from Simon Schuster. You said it took a while to get that. When did you get that book deal? I was trying to remember.
I got it in 2009. I mean, really, well, this is what happened, Marshall. I got the Macarthur, and the next thing I know, my picture's on the front page of the New York Times.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I did the interview with the Times reporter, and I said, be sure and mention that I'm writing a book. And so he kindly enough included that line in the story. And so then all of a sudden I'm getting calls from publishers, which is a nice problem to have. Usually it's the other way. You're trying to bang their door down. So well, then the other thing that happened is I got invited on Colbert, and
you did a good job on that, by the way.
Well, thank you. Well, he was very nice to me by comparison to some of his other guests. I think he felt sorry for me, but and so while I was in New York, my agent, took advantage of these people who'd already contacted me, and then put together a list of others too. And I just kind of, for the next while I was in New York, just basically spent 2 days, or maybe it was 3 days, just going and visiting with publishers.
Yeah.
And then literally Marshall got offers. I mean, like I didn't have to write a book proposal, nothing. I mean, it was
wow.
Talk about easy. Well, I had written something fairly short. I mean, 30 or 40 pages, but nothing they like, nothing that approaches what it should be. So anyway.
Well, if anybody had any curiosity of who you were, all they had to do was Google Clarion Mitchell, and they would have gotten a play director,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then they knew where to go.
A choreographer and play director. Exactly. That's who they thought. Oh, by the way, speaking of, which cracks me up to no end, if you Google me now, the photo that comes up with me now, just let you know how Google Images is not always accurate. It's Felix Vail. It's not me. It's actually Felix Vail, the serial killer.
That's Felix Vail's revenge.
Yeah, it is. That's his revenge on me, I guess. Hysterical.
Yeah, Felix Vail was really the last really big thing that you did at the Clarion Ledger when you were there.
Yeah, that was quite a big deal. We wrote about it, or I did. I wrote about a 9,000 word piece on him, and then he got arrested, and then of course he went to trial and got convicted. It was the oldest serial killer case in U.S. history, oldest, to my knowledge, oldest cold case, conviction in U.S. history, because there was one in Chicago that was a little bit older, but it got tossed out. So to my knowledge, in terms of a conviction that stayed in place, it's the oldest one.
When did he commit the murders? I was trying to remember that.
Yeah. So he killed his first wife in 1962. And
Okay. Wow. Okay.
And then the second wife disappeared 11 years after that. And then the next wife disappeared 11 years after that. He had, we say regularity, and
yeah, he was kind of like cicadas, except a lot.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of scary, isn't it?
Yeah, what was it about the 70s? It really, it seems like we were watching a documentary on, serial killers in the 70s. I was like, it seemed to be a thing. My son, how did you survive?
And there were a bunch of them in the 70s, but yeah, that's when Felix did some of his work, and I'm convinced there may be other women as well, but it's just, I just have never been able to nail down any other names.
Well, at least the good news is he's on the right side of the bars now.
Yeah, he's in Angola now.
Wow. So, wow. I take it he's not a huge fan of you.
Well, it's funny at the sentencing hearing. This is what as journalists we love. He goes to the sentencing hearing, and instead of sitting there, spending his, well, I guess he was talking about his innocence, but then all of a sudden he segues into how that I had gotten this idea for the story to write about him from reading James Patterson novels. And I turned to Will, who's, the brother of the woman who was killed. And I told him later, I was like, I'm gonna have to read one, I guess.
Yeah, really. Might as well get started to see where I got my idea from.
Exactly.
James Patterson. And I can guarantee that, when you first started breaking these kind of cases, it was actually Mississippi Burning that kind of lit the fire under you to get you to start investigating this. And you started about that. You, like I said, in your book, you cover 4 different cases.
Yeah.
Edgar Evers was the first one. I wasn't there for that one. I did see you get played on a movie.
Yeah. That was
the Rob Reiner movie.
The Rob Reiner film. I watched them film that. That was kind of an interesting experience.
Was it his name? Jerry Levine? Is that the actor? I can't remember.
That is a very good memory. Yeah, it's Jerry Levine that played me. The guy he was in Teen Wolf, I think, and some other movies. But Jerry did, did a good job. I mean,
it's energetic.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
And it's told from the prosecutor's perspective, Bobby Lawler's perspective.
Yeah.
And that's fine. So
No, the movie, I think 9 people saw it. It wasn't terrible.
Yeah, it ran on TNT forever. I mean, I think they got it for, it's kind of like It's a Wonderful Life in the sense of they got it for nothing. So they played it to death.
Just over and over and over. Well, it was one of those kind of movies that it was fun to watch just because of all the scenes around Jackson.
Oh, I know. And you can see the Mayflower, and you can see all the different landmarks, and you can see people you knew, who were extras in the film. That was always fun.
And they go down to the ruins of Windsor to meet,
Oh, I know. That's funny when they meet Bill Mardennis in the Windsor ruins, which is a creepy place.
It's very creepy at night. So that was a fun movie, but it was a really important time for you because there was a lot of things wrapped up with that. To me, number one, just meeting the Evers family, who are, them and the Damer family are probably 2 of the nicest families that you will ever meet, to go through such god-awful, horrible tragedy in their life. They're just so warm and so forth. But, you got to know them really well, and you still are very good friends with them. But there was a lot of things about Mississippi that, obviously the Sovereignty Commission files, which that was a big part of it, finding, but it was like a lot, it's like anything in Mississippi, it seems like everybody knew what had gone on and nobody was doing anything about it.
Well, that's what I always say about these cases. People talk about these cases, what made me decide to do these cases or whatever. It's like, look, this is the height of injustice. I mean, it's not just that these guys got away with murder. Everybody knew they got away with murder. I mean, it was like injustice at its height. So that's what stuck in my craw. I saw the movie Mississippi Burning, and it's a fictional film, and the civil rights activists hate that film, and I understand why. But it was very powerful to me personally, because I didn't know any of that. Like, I knew none of that, zero of that. And when I basically out of this movie, I'm thinking, nobody ever got prosecuted for murder? And, I'm a court reporter, and it's like, this is the most logical question in the world to ask. It's like, wait a minute, all these Klansmen were involved in killing 3 people, and nobody got prosecuted for murder? And that was something I just couldn't wrap my head around. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been there for 3 years. And I mean, who was Benny Ivory the managing editor?
Yeah, Benny was the editor by that point.
Who's editor? Okay. So what kind of reception did you get in the newsroom when you're like, okay, no, this is something I'm going to go after?
Yeah, I know. Well, there was one editor that wasn't exactly thrilled, but for the most part, we got incredible support, and I'm very grateful. I mean, the Clarion Ledger could have easily said, "Hey, Jerry, this is enough," or whatever. Don't you? We need you to do something else, or whatever that would have been. And I know, to be honest, Benny and the rest of the editors got hate calls. And Ronnie Agnew, you well know, all got hate calls, and people saying they're going to cancel their subscriptions and all that kind of stuff, death threats. I mean, it just kind of goes with the territory.
Yeah, I never had the pleasure of working with Benny. I know everybody back in the editorial department loved him. But Ronnie did work with, and I still work with some over at MPB. And I mean, he, like I said, he's always backed me. And so I was always very grateful on that. Yeah. So it was on that too. That moment when that verdict came out, and I don't know if it played out like in the movie, out on the courthouse steps kind of thing, but
no, it wasn't on the courthouse steps. So
I didn't think that part didn't dramatic. Yeah.
But this part was correct. And when the word guilty rang out, you could hear these like waves of joy as they cascaded down the hall.
Wow.
To reach a foyer full of people, black and white, just erupted in cheers. You could hear the cheers in the courtroom.
It was weird. Yeah, it's weird about that, because you say black and white on that, and here it was known and it was not being taken care of, and yet when it finally does get taken care of, people are finally coming up. Oh man, thank you, thank goodness. It's amazing how that seems to happen so often.
It is fascinating, like when I first started doing this work and started writing about these cases, I got a lot of pushback. I'm talking about from the public and letters and et cetera, that kind of thing. But I got to tell you, by the end of it, the end of the journey, I had people I didn't know walking up to me and shaking hands and saying, wow, thank you. Yeah. So I'll never forget that. I was walking out of the courtroom one day covering the Edgar Ray Killen trial, the Mississippi Burning case. And this guy, African-American guy, just walked up to me. I just want to say thank you. Wow. I was like, wow, okay, thank you. And so it's not me, it's the work. It's the fact of seeing justice done finally. And so that's what it's about. In fact, I'd say about my book, even though, look, it's a memoir, I know it's from my perspective and all those other kind of things, but I hope that what shines through is the courage of the families to persist and continue with these cases. They could have easily said, look, we've been through enough. We don't want to go through anymore. But they wanted to see justice for their loved ones. And I can't say enough good things about the families, and you mentioned them. All these cases.
I interviewed Dennis and Vernon Jr. For conversations, and number one, Vernon Jr. looks so much like his father.
Oh, doesn't he?
Oh my Lord!
It's just like you're staring at a ghost.
I told my producer, I said, I'm not quite sure how you managed to get Vernon Damer here today, senior here today, but I think you pulled it off. But they were so wonderful talking about it. But even now, the pain still is there and it's still
Oh
palpable.
yeah,
And,
yeah. It's like Miss Damer says, the widow Vernon Damer, Ellie Damer. It will never be the past for us.
right.
And I really thought about that. The night before the jury came back with the guilty verdict, it's hard for people to understand this, but it looked like that night there might be a hung jury, because you could see when the jurors came back in, they had deliberated for a few hours and came back into the courtroom, and one of the jurors especially, she was just red-faced. I'm thinking, ooh, this is not a good sign,
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Marilyn Evers that night, and she told me a story she'd never told me before, Marshall. She said, the night Megger was killed, there were basically, they lived on the edge of a white neighborhood. Like, this is a black neighborhood. This is all segregated days, but they lived on the edge of a white neighborhood. So there were some white kids, curious, of course. I mean, you hear the shot and commotion or whatever it is, and you come over. And anyway, I had said something to her about, getting beyond all this, and she just kind of said, no, it's good to you, kind of, I was thinking she'd completely moved beyond all this, and it's just, no, it still hurts, there's still that pain. And she told how that this white kids wandered up, and the police too, and she said, if I had had a machine gun that night, I would have mowed down everybody white.
Wow.
And I was like, when she said that, to myself, I was like, I have no clue what it's like. You know what I mean? Like, I can think I understand. I don't begin to understand that.
Right.
And so she explained that. And I think those are the kind of conversations that helped me begin to understand what I didn't understand. And then she told me when the verdict came in, this is later on after the verdict, she told me that when she heard guilty, it was like all that anger and all that hate came out of every pore of her body.
Wow. So she was able to release it. Because, I mean, that's, like I said, just the 2 or 3 times I've met her briefly, she was so incredibly kind and gracious, and you wouldn't think, and just watching her in public and watching her on just wouldn't sense that. But you know what? I don't blame her for feeling that way initially, because it was, you're holding your husband on the driveway as he
bleeding to death.
Yeah. Unbelievable. The Damer case is one that I don't remember reading about it in school.
No, I mean, I didn't know anything about it, Marshall, when the Damer family contacted me. Not even the
guy
name.
who literally was fighting for people's right to vote, and he was getting attacked, and protected his family in a bold stand. And if it hadn't been for the fact for smoke and flame inhalation, he probably would have made it through it. But and then you have that iconic photograph of his son standing in military uniform, looking at the burned out husk of where they used to live, where they'd lost their father, protecting the very rights that they were supposed to be protecting. Just incredible story.
They were off protecting this country, but nobody was protecting our home, so to speak, but nobody was protecting theirs.
Yeah, I just got done reading Curtis's book.
It's a good book.
I did not realize that was David Landrum's dad.
Yeah. The football player.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd never met David. I'd never met David before until the other night.
He ran for office a few years ago, and I remember I'd run into him occasionally around here. I did not realize that was his dad. It's like, okay, there are 2 degrees of separation in Mississippi.
No, 1.5 in Mississippi.
That is the truth. So how many times do you get, you made fun of my uncle, or you wrote?
Oh yeah, I'm always, you always run that risk, when you're in when you're in Mississippi, because there are not 6 degrees of separation there.
But one of the things I got, from your book and then also from Curtis's too, is that the sense of the anger and the fear of the people is so similar to what we're seeing today. And so,
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. Or let's take what happened in El Paso, right?
right.
This guy in 2019, this guy in Dallas drives all the way to El Paso, kills 24 people. 24 because he was aiming at someone Hispanic and killed 24 people. And he said he did it to stop the invasion. The thing that's interesting to me about that language is that's the exact same language that Sam Bowers used in the summer of 1964 before the freedom workers came down. And so it's very fascinating. The language is very fascinating if you really pay attention to what people say.
But a lot of it's intentional.
Of course, it's all about making the enemy other. I mean, I think that's what it's all about. As long as people make other people other, whether that's like Sam Keane did a great book called Faces of the Enemy, and the premise of the book is this: before we kill people with our weapons, we kill them with our minds.
Yeah,
and I think that's it. I think that's the core of it.
I mean, you saw it in 1933. You see it in the 60s. You see it today, and it's scary. And I mean, that's one of the things I think that obviously that investigative journalism is why it's so important, because I think it helps put that back.
Yeah, I think investigative reporting is the lifeblood of democracy. I think that we're trying to help expose things that, sometimes people don't want exposed. You know what I mean? These are things that politicians don't want you to know, but we're telling you, whether by public record or otherwise. And I think it's a great service, and it's why we do what we do.
You and I both grew up in newspapers, and I mean, I still wax nostalgic when I smell the smell of ink.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, there's something about a newspaper, isn't there? I remember when I was a college student. Well, I went to school in Arkansas as undergrad, and I used to get the Arkansas Gazette every day and read it cover to cover. And then I would go in on Sundays to the library because they had the Times, And so I would, of course, it didn't have it on Sunday, right on Sunday, but I mean, like a few days later, they'd have the Sunday Times. And I'd sit there for hours, reading the Times. And I don't know, I don't think there's a way to replicate that online. I wish there were, but it's just not quite the same experience.
It is tough. But I remember, I'm trying to think when the wheels started coming off. It was in the mid 2000s. And
yeah. Well, once the internet kind of got to where, or once news became free,
a commodity,
once it became free, it's like everything once it's hit the digital wall, whether you're talking about radio, whether you're talking about newspapers, or whether you're talking about music, and now of course television and cable, that's hitting the digital wall. Everybody's cutting the cord and doing all those sorts of things. So it's kind of everything that hits it, including now probably film too is beginning to hit it, and other things like that. So
yeah, it's when obviously newspapers and television and radio, when you don't control the channel anymore, you can't control advertising. With the internet, everything's like that. Well, what happened was, and it's like I said, I remember back just from our experience at the Clarion Ledger, first to go were the columnists, and then, I mean, I was lucky to survive as long as I did, and I'm grateful for that. But different aspects. But then they started cutting reporters, and it seemed like investigative journalism started going. I know that's why Mississippi Today exists. It is. I know that's why what you're doing with Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting exists.
Yep.
And it's not to replace that; it's to help.
No, it's to really to help it out. Really help it out. Both Mississippi Today and us too. Our model is to share our content, or it's not just. So if there's a print publication out there. I know we're partnering with Mississippi Press Association, so we share our content out with all those members, so they're able to publish our stories.
Yeah, it's the same thing. What we've got too, brother. We're not competing. We're collaborating and cooperating. because I think that's what's important there. That's the thing. And I've been able to do stuff with Mississippi Press Association for a long time and gotten to know a lot of the publishers and editors and the owners and so forth.
Right, exactly.
Mississippi's had a long tradition of having really scrappy, important small newspapers.
No question. Yeah. I mean, you look at the, not just the Delta Democrat Times, but then Hazel Brandon Smith's, paper and Holmes County and others. She was a force of nature, man. One of my heroes. I love her.
Definitely on that. A lot of long traditional, but did you ever figure that you'd be here in Mississippi for as long as you've been in Mississippi?
No. I started to put this line in my book, but I didn't really have a place for it. I was like, I never intended to move to Mississippi. And once I got here, I never intended to stay. And now I'm not sure if I'll ever leave, something like that.
Well, I think a lot of us have that same feeling. I mean, I came here and thought I'd be here 2 years because that's how you worked at a smaller paper and then you worked at a bigger paper. And then
you just kept working up. And I just got, I got here. That was my plan. I was going to be here, 2 or 3 years, and I would be off to, let's say, Nashville or Cincinnati, or, I'd like keep going, make my way eventually to the Times or the Post or whatever. And that was the dream, of course.
Yeah.
But I never, I had told someone I would send my clips after 6 months because I had interviewed I think it was Dallas Times Herald, and they go, send us your clips in a few months. And I go, okay. And I never did.
That one kind of surprises me a little bit because, I mean, you're from Texarkana.
Yeah.
And Texas like the back of your hand. And Texas, if there's any other place that's got politics as screwed up as us, although Florida seems to be doing really well these days themselves. But I mean, Texas is, I've always said, awesome.
Oh, we're always, Texas is always, we believe in kind of like Mississippi. We believe in if we accidentally shoot ourselves in one foot, then it's time to pull out the gun and shoot the other.
Exactly. So that one foot doesn't hurt more than the other on that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And apparently keeping the lights on is a big problem over there these days too. So.
I know. I can't believe how bad it is over there. It's just cracking me up.
I was so glad we got through the Dallas airport, with all the airline problems that have been going on lately, but also
American Airlines. Yeah.
In fact, the lights stayed on too. It's crazy. But I mean, I could have seen you making that move. What, seriously?
Yeah. And then at some point I had the Times offer me a job. Like when Hal Raines was there, he offered me a job to go work there. And so, I mean, I had opportunities mid-career even, to go work for the Times. I said, well, how long are you going to let me write about Mississippi? And he didn't know. So I was that's okay.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I know I turned down a couple jobs because I had a chance to leave. But I was thinking to myself, well, number one, the food's good here. Number two, the people to draw cartoons. I had Governor Fordyce, about that time.
Hey, you don't want to leave Fordyce, right? I mean, that's
Frank Melton, and then I mean, why would you leave that? And I think
exactly that's kind of the way I feel, on the news side of things. So anyway,
definitely. But you also too, I mean, corporate Gannett, that they supported you also, and
oh yeah, they were tremendously supportive. I mean,
and you and I both got to work with people and that was the thing I don't think people understood about the Clarion Ledger for a long time, was that even though its circulation didn't really show this, the people that worked there were incredibly good for the size newspaper.
Yeah. Well, we got voted by editor and publisher one of the best. Well, I forgot what their caveat was, but one of the best medium newspapers. I can't remember what size they put on it, whatever adjective they used, but one of the best newspapers in America. So
it was the year we were both finalists. Because it was like, and not because we were finalists, but I mean just for the
overall because of the quality of the work.
I mean, I think but I think you and I both benefited for whom we worked with.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you have worked with Debbie Skipper for years, who I tell people that she has the best laugh of any human being you'll ever.
She does. She's got a great laugh, doesn't she?
I would show her my cartoon ideas, and she would just cackle. And it was just like,
she's a great audience for you. She always was.
My gosh, it was
show your cartoons to. I'd hear her every time you come over and drop off cartoons. I'd hear Debbie, so it was
It was
great.
the joy of the last couple of years I was there. It was the joy of my life showing her the ideas, that she would just laugh. But she's also a hell of an editor, and
She's a great editor.
Worked with you for a long time, and
she's working with me now with the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting. So I'm grateful to have Debbie.
Which that makes me very happy. That I'm glad that she's working with you. And I had the same thing with David Hampton, for years as an editor. I tell people that that I was a 2-time finalist, whatever, because I had a great editor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these stories aren't made in a vacuum, or these cartoons aren't made in a vacuum. You've got other people that are, input or helping you think about it more, or revising it, or editing, in a writing standpoint.
We had some good, like you said, executive editors too. You mentioned Ronnie and Sean was good. She's over.
Ronnie and Sean both excellent.
So it worked out pretty well on that. Jerry, there's something about you. Number one, you're one of the nicer people in the world to talk to meet, and so forth. When you go talk to these monsters, maybe I'm not being fair to monsters, but when you go talk to some of these just
Klan guys,
hardly racist human beings, you seem to be like take some kind of weird joy out of it in a way, but you also get them to open up and just like, it's almost like, why are they saying these things to you? I don't understand. Do they not know who you are? I mean,
well, the good news is when I was doing most of this work, the internet didn't exist, so that always helps.
Yeah.
Because they were, they couldn't find out, about my previous stories or whatever. But I think there's several things at play there. One is people want, I even beyond Klansmen, people want to tell the story of their lives.
Yeah.
And so I kind of, in a way, it played into that. These are people that are getting on with life and maybe want to reflect back and talk about their lives. And I guess I took advantage of that in a sense. I don't mean it in a negative sense. I mean in the fact that kind of played into what I was looking for. I never called them and said, hey, I want to, ask you about your Klan days or whatever. I just say, hey, I want to come interview you and, talk, ask you about, so I would just ask, like Beckwith, how did he get involved politically? Of course, he eventually talked about the Klan. Yeah. He insisted he didn't belong, but it was pretty obvious he did by the names he kept calling off.
Jerry, I think one of my favorite stories, and I've had you tell this before, I've interviewed, is the one
with Beckwith.
Yeah, Beckwith, taking you to
the So I went to interview Byron Deal Beckwith. He lived in Signal Mountain, Tennessee, which is just outside of Chattanooga, and absolutely this was April of 1990. In case people won't know when this was, but I went and interviewed him. Absolutely most racist person I ever spent serious time with. It was like N-word this, N-word that, and then and then he started in all the other races, non-white races, and then he was very anti-Semitic too. And so it was, how some people, after you talk to them for a while, you feel like you need a bath. It was one of those kind of conversations. Yeah. And so it was starting to get dark, and I thought, well, it's probably a good time to go. And the place. I know the place. Signal Mountain, which by the way, kind of interesting side note on Signal Mountain. The Klan was still active there when I went, and Dr. King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech makes reference to the mountain that faces it, which is Lookout Mountain.
Yeah.
And let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain, which the Klan was active there too. So, but anyway, Beckwith insisted on walking me out to the car, and I'm like, that's okay. I think I can find my way. And so, because my car was literally at the end of the driveway. I mean, that's all. That wasn't very far away. But he walked me out to the car anyway, and gets me out there and says, if you write positive things about white Caucasian Christians, God will bless you. If you write negative things about white Caucasian Christians, God will punish you. If God does not punish you directly, several individuals will do it for him.
Nice.
And so his wife and made me a sandwich.
I take it you threw that out the window on the way down the hill.
You are correct. It did not make the trip with me.
But what a twisted view of faith and religion too. You know?
Oh yeah, he's Christian identity, which is this awful white supremacist religion. People may not know. They hear Christian and they think, no, it's not. No, it's not like what you think Christian. It's Christian identity, which is this white supremacist, awful religion, which believes Adam and Eve are white people, believes that all the non-white races are mud people, and don't have souls. I mean, they're just awful. I mean, I could go on all day about Christian identity. It's just horribly racist.
1990, you're going up there. This is before cell phones. I mean,
yeah. I think we had pagers, but we didn't have cell phones.
Yeah. I mean, literally, you're going up into, and those roads are pretty twisted. Like my parents used to say, when they're from East Tennessee, it's like they let a black snake loose and it. I mean, so you're going up in the middle of nowhere, which
the belly of the beast, man.
Yeah. So, number one, your wife at the time, what was her reaction? Number two,
oh my goodness. Oh, yeah, my wife at the time was. Okay. Oh, this is the awful part. So my wife at the time was 8 months pregnant. I'm not making that up. She was like 8 months pregnant.
Have the baby? I mean, good grief. How much
stress? I know. That's how heartless I was. I mean, she was like, very upset that I was going. She said at one point, and I showed it to her. I wasn't going to print the book without saying, look, you do remember saying this to me. And she goes, oh yeah. And she basically said, if you go, I'll never forgive you. That's literally what she said to me. And I just kept saying, I have to go. I don't know what drove me other than I just knew I had to go talk to this guy. But I knew at some point if, I wanted to be able to talk to him before anything happened. Let's say he got arrested or anything like that. I mean, I wanted to go interview this guy. And sure enough, he talked forever, about anything and everything, including, the Medgar Evers case, the case he got convicted of down in New Orleans for he took a ticking time bomb down to New Orleans to try to blow up a Jewish leader. Got arrested for that and convicted, sent to prison.
Sam Bowers and the great coming in the wheelchair. And then you found out.
Yeah, Devers Nix. That was his buddy, okay. Devers Nix. Yeah. Okay.
My memory obviously is a little fuzzy, but that's all right. The golf.
Yeah. Well, so Devers Nix, to back up in time a little bit on that one. So Sam Bowers gets arrested along with a guy named Devers Nix. And when this is in May of 1998.
Yeah.
And, so the family brings Devers Nix in, who is like I said, Bowers' right-hand guy. It was like the most pitiful sight you'd ever seen. It was like, they wheeled him in a wheelchair and had a green oxygen tank. And it was like the most pitiful thing. And they wheeled him up in front of the judge. And he's like, I can't take more than a couple steps without needing oxygen, judge. And it's like, well, judge is like, normally I don't do this, but I'm gonna let you out without bond. A dozen days later, it just sounds like I'm making it up. We caught him on the golf course. We actually got pictures of him playing golf. So we ran, I'm sure you remember, we ran before and after pictures of, Klansman says he's too sick for jail, but not for golf.
Yeah, that was
a classic.
Yeah, I remember the photographer running out the door on that one. You said something very interesting, and I meant to follow up with you on that, but you talked about imagine what it'd be like now with social media. And I know the difference between the 2001 flag vote and the one now. I can't even imagine what the 2001 flag vote would have been like with social media.
I know.
It would have totally changed all these cases that you're talking about. Because, I mean, there was one point when, it's as opposed to printing up 1,000 flyers and sticking it on cars, which Beck did. Obviously you see now the influence that social media has had on changing our views of the world and our views of reality. Now, we're not even coming to these arguments anymore with the same set of facts.
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, we used to have, as a society in general, a set of common facts, and now we don't have that anymore. You know, I get to bring my own facts.
Right. No, and I mean that is once again, that's very important. Why what the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting does, and what Mississippi Day does, and what reputable. But how? I mean, you and I have watched in the last 15 years of our career the media business just completely turn upside down. And I mean,
and we've
there's been some good things, not, I mean, this kind of thing's possible because of technology.
Well, I think one of the problems for people is that, we understand, because we're in the business, we understand distinctions that the public may or may not understand. So you've got quote unquote news shows, and I'm not picking on any particular channel. Here we go. Let's go the whole gamut. Fox, CNN, MSNBC. So we'll just pick those three just as examples. What is their programming at night? Right. It's all commentary, what we would call commentary, but they come across as news presenters, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like pseudo news in a way, but obviously they have their commentary, and so it's just them talking and other people commenting, and people being smart aleck or clever or whatever it is. And so you can understand how people get confused. I mean, they see that and think that's the news when it's not the news. All that stuff at night is all commentary. In fact, most of the programming anymore on almost all those channels is commentary to some extent. And so it's not, you used to have, like, let's take CNN, for example. What did CNN look like? It was just news. It was a constant news feed, or headline news. It was just a constant news feed, that kind of thing, instead of having the other things. So, but the other thing gets ratings. So
yeah, it's easier to tickle the amygdala than it is to engage the frontal cortex on that. And
exactly.
Somebody says, well, there needs to be all straight news the whole time. Like I said, I don't think that would last a week and a half.
Well, it hasn't lasted. If that were true, it would still be on the air.
But I mean, when I can write right now on my Facebook page, I can write, I am so grateful to be part of the media. Oh my gosh,
you would get pilloried.
Oh, it would light up. But like you said, when I think of the media, I think of like you and all, Emily at Wagster Pettis, and I think all the people I've worked with that are like Mississippians or have been in Mississippi a long time, who care about the state, or just doing, I think about that. I don't think about Don Lemon or
right. And exactly. And look, they have their role, but it should be labeled as what it is, which is commentary. It is commentary. It is not news. It is commentary.
Well, how do we get more vegetables back into our diet?
That's a good question. Well, I think that's why we're doing what we're doing. We're providing that content. So, like, let's say the average newspaper in Mississippi doesn't have much of a staff anymore. I mean, like, they don't have the people. They certainly don't have someone that can go cover the Capitol. They don't have, they don't have these resources. They don't have the staff to do investigative reporting. So that's why you guys do what you do, and we do what we do at the Center for Investigative Reporting. We're trying to provide that content that people need to know. It's stuff people need to know. People need to know these things. They need to know how politicians are spending our public money. We need to know this. This is not something that needs to go unreported. And, and so that's why we need to, it's, as I said, the lifeblood of democracy. If we don't have that, if that goes away, then we are totally open to being taken over by an authoritarian or whomever, because they'll be able to control the opinions of people.
Well, that's the thing. And, I've been working on my master's ever so slowly, but one of the classes, they talked about how now where you can create with technology, very polished, very news looking like programs.
Exactly.
propaganda.
Well, and that's not new.
No, I know. There was a guy.
But you're right. You're absolutely correct. They'll
yeah.
Well, they'll call themselves things, and I'm not just picking on this one, but I'm giving it as an example. Newsmax, let's say, for example, and obviously they're coming from a particular political place, but they want to come across as a news show. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, you're absolutely correct. And that's part of the problem, I think, now in general. For all of us, we lead busy lives, and you see these feeds, on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and you're going, oh wow, I didn't know that. And it's so easy to just retweet it or to share it on Facebook without really digging down to figure out, hey, is this legitimate? Is this really happen? And so often you'll hear coming back and go, hey, wait a minute, that was a fake story, and so we have to be real careful about, that's why legitimate news sources are important, because it's not, Joe Blow's blog is just not necessarily a legitimate news source.
Yeah, because you could have an anonymous blog and you don't know who the person's, what their angle.
It may be, they might be the Russians for all we know, or the Chinese, or whoever. We don't know. I'm convinced a lot of these folks, on a certain amount of folks on Twitter, are just bots. They're just, it doesn't seem like real people.
You hope not, anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a few of them I'm like, oh, please don't let your children.
Yeah. Well, some are. I'm not saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's I think the challenge is obviously I always love this analogy, but when my kids were little, we would give them chicken nuggets that had vegetables ground into it.
I know. And how do we get more vegetables now?
How do we get more vegetables in the diet? Well, Jerry, I know you've been busy. You've been speaking.
I spoke today in Oxford, Ohio. Today is the anniversary of the killings of James Chaney, Mickey Schwerner, and Andy Goodman, who were the three young civil rights workers who were killed by the Klan in '64 in Mississippi. And they trained right here.
Really?
Yeah, they trained right here. I'm on the campus of Miami University, and it was actually where they trained technically. Now it's part of Miami's campus, but technically Western College for Women is where they trained. And if you ever seen the footage or photographs from those days, that's where the training took place. And then, of course, there are almost 1,000 students, and then they came to Mississippi. It was part of what's called Freedom Summer.
Yeah, was it? I'm trying to think. Was it 64?
64. Sorry, 64. Yeah, that was 64. So it's 57 years ago today.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So you had a good reception, good speech. I know it's nice.
Yeah. Well, anytime you sell all the books that the seller brings, even if it's only 2 or 3, you feel pretty good, right?
It's a win. It's a win. I know it's nice too to be able to stand up in front of people again.
Oh, I love it. I love to be able. I haven't. It's been a while, and to stand up in front of folks and be able to share stories. that's all. It's all what you do, and it's all what I do. You get up in front of people and just tell stories.
And that's, at the end of the day, I tell people that's the beauty of being here, because there's so many great storytellers to begin with, but I think it kind of gets in your blood after a while.
I think so. There's something, you look at a place like Mississippi, and it's amazing, isn't it? We're the land of paradoxes. We're the best and worst of America, aren't we? We've got
literacy, yet we have no
illiteracy. The nation's worst illiteracy rate, and some of the world's greatest writers.
Right.
Fascinating, isn't it? That some of the world's richest soil, and yet some of the nation's poorest people most impoverished people living there. So it's very fascinating. And that's why, it's another reason I love Mississippi. It's just plus, and people sometimes say, well, what's so great about Mississippi? I said, look, you will never find a more hospitable place in Mississippi, because you can walk by and someone will say, you hungry? It happens, doesn't it? You eating yet?
If you do something, and you've done a ton on the national stage, but people are honestly proud for you. They're happy for you when you do things that make Mississippi look good on a national stage.
Look at what all Mississippi's done. I think sometimes people ask me, Mississippi, Mississippi has probably come further than any other state since the civil rights movement. You think about where Mississippi was in '64, which is only 6% of Black Mississippians were allowed to even register to vote. And today, Mississippi has more Black elected officials than any other state. So that's something. I mean, that is a mark of progress. Now, obviously, a lot more needs to be done, but that's certainly a mark of progress.
Jerry, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Marshall. And it's always good to chat with you and catch up. But yeah, I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope for Mississippi and for the nation. I think that we've got to get back to what's important.
Yeah, definitely. And real quickly before we go, what's next for you? You got another book in the works?
I would love to do a book about the serial killer guy. I haven't been able to convince my publisher yet. But yeah, we're working on some projects. We're doing a project on diabetes, which is obviously very devastating. And so, yeah, we're working on some pretty good projects. I'm very excited about them, and some of them and basically we're working together with Mississippi Today and some other partners on this project. So we're very excited about them.
Well, now that we can do such things, I hope to bump into you in person soon.
Yeah, it'd be great to see you.
It'd be great.
Exactly.
Well, Jerry, good talking to you. You travel safe.
Great to talk to you. Thanks, Marshall. All right, take care. Bye-bye.